You'll shortly see why I had to give you the previous PDF, because my artwork looks nothing like the digestive tract. But I think it will be easier for you to follow along. So before we move on to the stomach, it's important for you to know that about 60% of carbohydrates are digested by the enzymes produced in the mouth. That's why bread, pasta, cookies, and stuff like that practically melt in your mouth. They practically slide down your throat liquid already without even having to be digested. And that's one reason why drinking excessively with meals, especially iced drinks and soda, impede digestion. Why? Well, we just talked about how temperature affects enzymes. Heat destroys them, but cold renders them dormant. That's why we freeze food, to stop the enzymes from ripening it. It puts it into a state of suspended animation, and you don't want to suspend your enzymes in the middle of your meal. But assuming all is well, the food you eat ends up in your stomach, which moves it through 2 phases, approximately 1 hour each. Now, the first stage is pre-digestion, where enzymes are produced that continue to break down the food. Protein digestion starts here, not in the mouth. And as that happens, the stomach begins to expand and the mucosal lining thickens. And once that's done, the stomach moves into phase 2 and adds pepsin and hydrochloride to kill the pathogens and continue pre-digesting. Now, how this works is very interesting, and I think it'll give you an idea of how everything is tied together. As the stomach expands, it presses on the vascular system surrounding it and literally pulls hydrogen and chloride out of the blood to make hydrochloride. Now, if hydrochloride is not present due to lack of raw materials in the blood or HCl inhibiting drugs, how many people do you know take antacids? Then the proteins won't break down to be absorbed. Now, what does this mean to your plasma membrane? If you don't know, go back and reread part 1 of the nutrition script. Now, at what pH is food digested in the stomach? Well, approximately 3, but in reality, the enzymes that are in the stomach work between a 3 and a 6 pH. That is their range. They don't work outside of that range. Now, the resting stomach is at about a 6.5 pH when your stomach doesn't have any food in it. But as soon as you eat food, the pH starts to decrease. And this is where soda comes into play. This is why soda is so dangerous to drink with your meals, because the pH of soda is between 2 and 2.5. Now, to compare that, the pH of battery acid is about a 1. So, and just to give you an idea, normal stomach acid can go all the way down to a 3 and is strong enough to dissolve a razor blade. Now, if you're drinking soda with your meal, you run the risk of dropping your pH below a 3. And in that case, you're not going to destroy your enzymes. They are just going to go dormant. They're not going to work below a 3, which means you're not going to be digesting your food properly. Now, as far as soda is concerned, I use soda to clean my toilets and to clean rust off of stuff. It's extremely acidic. But I don't know. I think I'd have to give it a second thought as far as drinking the stuff. Now, the stomach wall is protected by a very thick, highly alkaline mucus lining that continuously replenishes itself to the tune of 500,000 cells a minute. Now, that means that the stomach effectively has a new lining every 3 days. That's why it's usually relatively easy to repair a damaged stomach lining. Now, here's a fun fact for you. 25% of the nutrients you consume go to your eyes. And an excellent website on how to naturally improve your eyesight is integraleyesight.com. That's INTEGRAL, integraleyesight.com. Now, after food spends 2 hours pre-digesting in the stomach, it becomes chyme, which is a green, creamy-like mixture that trickles through the pyloric sphincter, which is that O-ring that we discussed, into the duodenum, which is that little 8-inch section of the intestines. Now, duodenum is the only part of the small intestines protected by a mucus lining. Why? Well, because that chine that's coming out of the stomach at a pH of 3, if it weren't protected, it would burn a hole right in it. 75% of ulcers occur in the duodenum. What do you think they're called? That's right, you guessed it, duodenal ulcers. In the duodenum, digestion only occurs at a pH of 7.5 or above. So, how does the chine go from a pH of 3 to 7.5 in that little 8-inch span? Well, here's how. The gallbladder is squeezing bile at an 8.8 pH into the duodenum, and the pancreas is depositing alkalizing minerals as well. So between the pancreas and the gallbladder, they are both alkalizing the duodenum. Now, how does the gallbladder and the pancreas know exactly how much to squeeze in there? How does it know? I mean, how does it know not to put too much, not enough, whatever? That's where the O-ring comes into play. When the O-ring sends the signal, it sends the signal of exactly how much to produce and put into the duodenum. That's the miracle of the body. Now, here are some statistics. Each year, over 100,000 hospitalizations and more than 16,000 deaths are directly attributed to ulcers and intestinal bleeding. 1 in 4 people taking aspirin to prevent heart attack develop an ulcer. Regular aspirin use has also been linked to macular degeneration in the elderly and hearing loss in men. There was an 18-year study done of over 88,000 women, found a 58% increase in the risk of pancreatic cancer in those who took more than 2 aspirins a week. Aspirin also promotes the deterioration of bone cartilage. So if you have osteopenia, osteoporosis, dental problems, I would rethink taking that daily aspirin. Now the liver, all nutrients go to the liver to pass muster. It's the transit system of the body, and it decides what happens to all incoming substances. It's kind of like Grand Central Station. What would happen? Grand Central Station takes all the trains in, gives them their destinations, and then sends them out again. Now, what would happen if half the trains that left Grand Central Station got halfway to their destination, turned around and came back full of passengers, unannounced, into the station? What would happen? Pure chaos. It would totally clog up the station, and the same thing happens to your liver. Now, the liver also filters all blood from 2 directions, your heart and your small intestines. And of course, it produces bile that's stored in the gallbladder. Now, the bile has another major function. It breaks down fats so your body can use them. Have you ever tried to wash butter or bacon fat off without soap? It doesn't work, does it? That's because soap is alkaline, and you need an alkaline substance to degrease fat. Now, without adequate bile, you can't digest fats well, which can result in a deficiency of the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. You may also have problems utilizing calcium because calcium needs both D and K to be absorbed. No D and K, no calcium absorption. Now, the next link that you click on is going to take you to a PDF that addresses this calcium issue separately because it's a very important issue and you really need to understand this dynamic. The inability to digest fat could set you up for insulin resistance. And how do you think all this may affect your lymph system? Again, part 1 of the nutrition script will tell you. Now, if fat is greasing up your insides and blobs are going through your intestines instead of that thin, watery mixture that the body is expecting, it could clog up everything. It could also break or flatten or damage the microvilli that are supposed to suck up the nutrients and deposit them into the bloodstream. So here's health secret number 7. And this isn't the only cause of type 2 diabetes, but it is a major one. Guess where undigested fat loves to live? All diabetics should have a conversation with their doctor about fat digestion. If it's an issue, how to improve it. And that should naturally lead to a discussion about enzymes and lymph. Improving fat digestion is a relatively easy fix that doesn't require medication, but it may require metabolic enzymes. And as an enzyme specialist, I strongly suggest that you consider taking an online symptom survey, which takes about 20 minutes to fill out. If you have inadequate enzymes, it may point you in the right direction as to where your deficiency lies. Let me know via email if you'd like me to send you a link to that questionnaire at no charge. Now, here are some signs that you may not be digesting fats. This is only a partial list. There's a full list in the outline that I gave out at the seminar, but here are a few. If you have dry skin or dandruff, or you have hair falling out, history of mouth sores or boils, tremors, inability to take a deep breath and hold it for at least 20 seconds, fertility issues, difficulty conceiving or miscarriages, pain in the lower back, stiffness after sitting, all those are possible signs of a fat deficiency. Now, since bile is made in the liver and only stored in the gallbladder, removal of the gallbladder does not stop the drip of bile. It simply slows the degreasing and alkalizing process and therefore increases the workload of the pancreas. Here's the backup plan. If the gallbladder can't, the pancreas picks up the slack, but there's a catch. The main job of the pancreas is hormone production, not enzymes. Although it does produce enzymes as needed, but it can only make so many enzymes in a lifetime. It's kind of like a spare tire. You have one spare tire for each enzyme, and once it runs out, it's done. So if you continually eat food that is devoid of enzymes, what impact does that have on your pancreas? Well, it may stop functioning, or at least stop functioning properly. So to summarize, if you have pancreatic issues, what other organ should you treat? Remember, the gallbladder is not really an organ, it's just a bag that holds bile. The organ that makes the bile is the liver. So the liver is the organ that you would want to treat. If you have gallbladder issues, what other organ is picking up the slack? The pancreas. If you have problems with any organ in the body, what system should you cleanse? The lymph. Now, it may take 4 hours or more for food to go from the mouth past this section. So, if you eat a meal and 3 hours later you are having discomfort, where do you think the problem might lie? Is it in your stomach? Is it in the duodenum? Where do you think that the problem might be? We know that the food takes only 2 hours in the stomach. That's if you're not chugging Coke while you're eating and making your enzymes dormant. But under normal circumstances, food doesn't spend more than 2 hours in the stomach, and it spends about 2 hours in the duodenum. So now you know that if it's 3 hours after you ate, the stomach, basically you have a duodenal issue. So if you know where the issue lies, you may be able to deal with that yourself. And if you can't, at least when you go to the doctor, you can speak intelligently about the issue. Now, what is a generally accepted surgical procedure for weight loss? Lap band, gastric bypass, things like that, right? Let's look at how this surgery affects the digestion process. The stomach, we know, must expand for the body to pull hydrogen and chloride from the blood to make hydrochloric acid, right? So no expansion, no HCl. How might that affect protein digestion or your plasma membrane? Again, if you don't know, go back and reread part 1 of the nutrition script. What does that mean for the blood? The chemicals that would normally be pulled out of the blood for digestion are now left in place to seek new jobs. What's the effect of that? Well, there's a whole cascade of health issues that can cause. First of all, it taxes the liver, the grand central station that's getting those chemicals back to it that it thought it had already dealt with. That's going to affect the gallbladder, which is going to put stress on the pancreas. Do you see how everything is connected? All right, let's move on to the jejunum. The jejunum is about 6 feet long, and it's where pancreatic enzymes that are made according to need. Remember, the O-ring sent the signal to the pancreas, it created the enzymes. This is the section that those enzymes are used to complete the digestion of the chyme. So, if you want to give your pancreas a rest so that it doesn't have to do all that work, should you take pancreatic enzymes? No. Why? Because pancreatic enzymes don't work until after the food has left the stomach. They don't work until the jejunum. The enzymes that you want to take to give your pancreas a rest must work in the stomach, not the jejunum. They have to work in the stomach so that that O-ring can send the signal to the pancreas not to produce enzymes. Now, the jejunum is lined with finger-like villi, kind of like the feet of a caterpillar, but not really. It's more like fur. The inside of your jejunum looks hairy, okay? And those hairs propel the food into the ileum. Now, the ileum is about 10 feet, and it's where most absorption occurs. Each of the villi is covered with about 600 microvilli that act as vacuum cleaners to suck up the nutrients. And just to give you an idea of how many of these you have, if you lay them side by side, they would cover a football field. Now remember, blood can't process fats. What processes fats? The lymph. Where do you think the proteins and carbs go? They are sucked up from this section of the ileum into the bloodstream, and then they are taken where? They're taken to the liver, where they are further metabolized, and then they are either stored for future use, or they're sent to cells and other parts of the body to be used immediately. Now, where do the fats go? The fats are sucked directly into the lymph system for processing. Now, a fungus resides here to digest any particles that are too large to be nutrition, thus protecting the bloodstream from circulating food particles that could cause food sensitivities and allergies. And this fungus or yeast is called what? Candida. Now I'm going to stop here because the next 8 slides are not animated and are therefore probably easier for you to download. So please review them before moving to the rest of the presentation. They cover Candida, the calcium issue we discussed earlier, vaccine impacts, and some healthy living tips that I think you'll like. So please proceed to the digestion script part 5, and I'll see you on the flip side.